Welcome everybody, I am Seven, I am the DM of 7th Roll, and I'm back with another revision video, this time talking about the monk, as you might be able to see on screen. For people who don't know what these videos are, or who didn't watch the last one talking about the fighter, as you probably know, I've been making a decent chunk of videos talking about the One D&D changes that Wizard has been pushing out over the last couple of months. And I've pretty much constantly been saying that I'm not 100% happy about them, mostly because I feel like they're not really doing what they promised. I feel like they're doing too little. And, I've been complaining about them. There are changes in there that are definitely good. There's some stuff there that I agree with, but not everything is good, and I still feel like they could do more with the 1D&D changes. So at a certain point in time, I was looking at it and I remembered that someone had once told me that you can complain about this kind of stuff constantly, but that doesn't really help anyone, right? So maybe, if you want to improve stuff, you should do it yourself. And that's pretty much what these videos are. This is me talking about what I would possibly do if I made my own version of 1D&D. Am I saying that these are going to be good changes? Am I saying that this is going to be better than 1D&D? No, but at least it allows me to make my own version and maybe discuss it with some of you what we could do with 1D&D. Now, before I get into the specifics of the monk, there's two things that I want to mention once again. First of all, this is unbalanced, untested. This is honestly just a bunch of ideas that I threw onto a piece of paper and put into GM Binder. Very simple. Don't think this is going to be good. If you put this into your D&D game, it's very likely going to be unbalanced at this point. It's something that I'm working on. The pages that you will see here are a first step, right? I work in IT. One of the things that we do there is when we have to make a product or something or an application, we start with a first version and we iterate on it depending on what the client or bosses or whatever say. And I kind of want to do something similar with this, which is why this says Monk version 0.1. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to mention is this is mostly going to be based on the original 5th edition Player's Handbook, the 2014 version. The reason that I'm mentioning that is because this takes ideas from the 1D&D bundles, because again, I don't think everything in there is bad, but it is mostly focused on the original Player's Handbook. The big reason that I'm mentioning this is because the big change of 1D&D weapon mastery is not in this bundle, and several other changes are not going to be in here as well. The big reason that I'm mentioning weapon mastery is because it's the big change. Like Bastions is also not going to be in here, but that's not really important towards classes. But I do want to mention that weapon mastery is something that is not in this bundle and is maybe something that I'll do in the future. Maybe give it like its own personal video. If I still want to put something like that into the game, I don't even know if I really do. But yeah. So, don't expect weapon mastery. Really, the second big point. So that's really all that I wanted to mention for the general introduction. Now, Monk. When I started this, when I originally said, maybe I want to make my own revisions, there were two classes that I really wanted to work on. And those two classes were Fighter and Monk. Fighter, because the comment had been thrown around, ooh, Fighter should just get maneuvers from Battlemaster. And Monk, because I think Monk is pretty much the biggest disappointment that we've had up until this point in the 1D&D story, right? Monk was the only class that didn't get a revision when Player's Handbook Revision 5 came out, so when Bundle 5 came out. And that we thought like, oh, they're going to make big monk changes, so we have to wait until bundle 6, and then in bundle 6 we barely got any changes. We got changes, sure, but so little, and monk didn't really get buffed in my opinion. It didn't really get the big changes that we were waiting for. So I really wanted to work on monk. Now the big question is, of course, how should monk be designed? What is the design idea behind this? And the first thing that I think you should look at there is monk was one of the 3 quote-unquote warrior classes when, you know, Wizards was still using the class groups, which they also dropped at this point. And that group of 3 classes was monk, barbarian, and fighter, which, to be fair, makes sense. These are sort of the 3 classes I think that get the closest to being tanks, right? Some might say like paladin, but I feel paladin more goes towards the support group or the damage dealing group, depending on how you play it. Doesn't really feel as tanky as barbarian, fighter, and monk do. They don't really have methods to ignore damage, right? So those 3 classes fight in a similar way, and then you kind of have to think, what are the differences, right? And the big reason why I gave maneuvers to fighter was, fairly simply put, fighters are characters that have learned how to fight. They've been taught how to fight. They had training. They have learned how to fight with their weapons. I think that's the biggest reasons why they are capable of wearing heavy armor as well. They've learned how to fight with these weapons and this armor. Barbarians seem more like we have learned how to fight with our gut. This is why reckless attack is a feature for them, but also they are more the kinds of characters that, because they have the highest hit dice, the highest hit point pool in the game, they're the ones who don't mind taking damage as much, right? They can take a bigger hit. It's, again, the reason probably that reckless attack fits them so well as a feature. And that leaves monk, right? Monk has, on average, the lowest hit point pool out of the 3 classes. But in return, monk also has the most ways to forego or block damage, right? Bonus action dodge is a very big example. Stunning strike to a certain extent. Deflect missiles. They're all ways to reduce damage. Slow fall, technically, as well. Evasion, right? They have methods to not take as much damage, which is really good because that way they also don't need as many hit points, but they need ways to dodge and weave between. So that's really the way that I want monk to end up as. And I'm not saying that D&D does a bad job in that. It definitely doesn't. I just think this is the core idea that you have to kind of get into. Now, am I saying that this bundle does that perfectly? No, but you know. Anyway, I've dawdled long enough. Let's get to the actual features. Again, I'm not going to go through like this part. It's not that this isn't interesting, but this is literally just stolen from One D&D in the player's handbook. So, you know, why would I go through this? This is the bundle, in case you're interested. This is like the little table that you see at the beginning. You might already see some changes, but we will go through them. And then I also want to mention this quickly, the starting class features. Again, I am not changing these at this current point in time. I don't feel like that's necessary. I feel like this is fine as it is currently. I don't think I'm going to do that. If I continue changing classes, I don't think I'm going to do that for any of the classes, to be honest. So let's get to the interesting part, the actual features. All right. At first level, you get 2 features, unarmored defense and martial arts. Now, both of these have changed compared to the player's handbook version. However, I'm going to start by explaining martial arts. Actually, I think they also need to be switched because alphabetical order, but whatever. Martial arts. For those of you who don't know how monk works, pretty much martial arts is a feature that monk gets where not only do you treat simple melee weapons and short swords as monk weapon, as long as they don't have the two-handed or heavy property, but whenever you make unarmed attacks or attacks with monk weapons, you can use dexterity instead of strength for the attack and damage rolls. Your damage die for any of those weapons or your unarmed strike becomes a d6. The original player's handbook had a d4. This is one of the 1D&D changes that I have kept. I'm a very big fan of increasing the damage die. I honestly think it's something that was long overdue. So pretty much whenever you make an unarmed strike or whenever you make an attack with a monk weapon and the damage die would be lower, you can deal a d6. Also, as you can see in the table, that die increases, becomes a d8 at 5th, d10 at 11th, and a d12 at 17th level. And then we get to the second big change in martial arts, which is you can make one unarmed strike as a bonus action. For people who don't know what the original was whenever you use the attack action, you can use your bonus action to make one unarmed strike. Yes, this is stolen from Baldur's Gate. No, I'm not going to change it immediately without good reason. The thing is, this is something I feel like isn't going to pop up a lot, this change. The thing is, a lot of the times a monk makes their attack orb from 5th level on 2 attacks and then just takes their bonus action to do their 3rd attack, or even sometimes flurry of blows. This is really for like niche cases where the monk uses an item, right? Like usually drinking a potion is an action in standard 5th edition rules. So if you drink a potion, in this case, now you can at least still make a bonus action attack, which I personally think makes monk a little bit more interesting. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room to play around with. I personally think this is slightly better, and it allows you to use your flurry of blows even if you didn't make an attack action attack, which I personally think is a little bit more fun. And then the last part of this is pretty much just certain monasteries, yada yada yada. You can choose whatever hell your weapon is as long as you still use the same game statistics. That hasn't changed. That's fluff technically. Now, why did I need to explain martial arts before unarmored defense? One of the biggest issues that I've personally had with monk as a class is that monk is very much a dex class, right? You very rarely will ever see someone play monk as a strength character. And there's a reason for that. It is almost unplayable as a strength character. Why is that? It's pretty much because of unarmored defense, I think. So, what do I mean? Right? In the original unarmored defense, it says your AC is equal to 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your wisdom modifier. This is very much similar to the barbarian version, but instead of wisdom there, you have constitution. Two big differences, however, a second big difference, however, I should say, is barbarian also gets this if they are wielding a shield. Monks are not proficient with shields, therefore they don't get unarmored defense if they are wielding a shield. The thing is, right, I just talked about monk and the core ideas behind it, right? Monk is a class that very much focuses itself on trying to ignore as much damage as possible or try to mitigate as much damage as possible because they have a lower hit die, right? Barbarian usually is going to pump most of its stats into strength and con. Monk has to put stats in dex, con, and then wisdom as well because of unarmored defense and their key abilities. So they're going to end up with the lowest amount of hit points, right? So one way to offset a portion of that is with a decent amount of AC. The problem is monks don't have any other way to get armor except through feats, which you don't really want to waste that on like light armor or something. And to be fair, for light armor, you still need dexterity, or by getting a decent unarmored defense. And for that, you need dexterity in the original version, right? So you can't make a strength monk. And like you can make a dex barbarian. It's not going to be as good because, you know, your rage damage bonus, for example, only gets added to strength attacks. Fighter, you can make a strength and dex. I personally just have a little bit of a problem with the fact that strength monks are not a thing. So I decided, you know what? Seeing as you can make your unarmed attacks with strength, because it says you can use, not you have to use, you can use. I said, you know what? I'm going to add strength to this. Because that way, now, if you have a strength of 16 and a dex of 8, at least you'll still be able to get a decent AC going. Even with 14 wisdom, you're now at 15 AC, right? Whereas, let's say that you had 16 strength and 8 dex, in the original version, you'd have 9 plus your wisdom and AC, which is absolutely nothing for a character that has less hit points, that has as many hit points as a bard or a rogue. Characters that try to mitigate that damage as much as possible as well, or rogue tries to stay as far away as possible, or try to play safe, right? So I decided to do this because this way at least strength monks are playable. Are they going to be as good as dex monks? No, because I still think that dex is a better stat than strength in 5th edition, but even then, at least now it is a viable choice in my personal opinion. So that's where that comes from. So that's level 1. Very basic, very easy. Level 2. You might have already noticed that level 2 has changed. There is mystic action, there's ki, and there's unarmored movement. First of all, unarmored movement has not changed. Very simple, still 2nd level, increases by 10 feet. Can't do that if you're wearing armor, wearing a shield. And at 9th level, you can move along vertical surfaces and across liquids. I don't think I changed the unarmored movement column. If I did, I'm sorry. It's not supposed to change. So what did change? Ki did. So for all of you who know Monk at 2nd level gets ki points. Yes, I am calling them ki points. I refuse to call them discipline points. Who the hell came up with that name? I don't have a problem with them changing the name. I literally have a problem with the word discipline points. Like, no. I refuse, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. Second of all, ki. At 2nd level, you get ki points, and you can spend these in the original version on 4 different things, even though it's technically 3 features, right? You have Flurry of Blows, you can spend a ki point to make 2 bonus action attacks, usually after you've taken the attack action, but, you know. Second of all, you have Step of the Wind. You can spend a ki point to bonus action dash or bonus action disengage, which is 2 and 3, technically. And then third is Patient Defense. You can spend a ki point to bonus action dodge, which, for those of you who don't know what the dodge action is, because very few people actually use it if they're not playing a monk, dodge pretty much means any attack against you is made at disadvantage. Now, why is this important? It's important because you might know that I've changed this to only 2 features. The big reason for that lies in the mystic action. What is the mystic action, you might ask? Mystic action is based on cunning action from rogue, and the idea is pretty much once on each of your turns you can take a bonus action to take the dash, disengage, or dodge action. So what did I change? I made it so that these 3 bonus actions do not cost a ki point anymore. Now, why did I do that? Why did I think this was okay? There's a couple of reasons, and I'm going to be honest, it's because I compare this to rogue, right? Rogue has cunning action where you can bonus action, dash, disengage, or hide. So I think dash and disengage in and of itself are already fine as free. I don't think Step of the Wind should cast a ki point. Some of you might be saying, oh, but you have unarmored movement, so you get a lot more movement. Yeah, but that's the point of Monk, right? Like, that's literally their point. They have more movement speed. That's the point, right? So I don't think you should just put a ki point cost on that for Monk and then not put it on Rogue. To be fair, I've said that I feel like Rogue has like a bunch of features from other classes, but just better. Like, they get expertise at 1 and 6, where Bard only gets it at 3 and 11, stuff like that. Anyway, not important. So dash and disengage is fine, but then you have dodge, right? Some of you might be thinking, well, isn't dodge, bonus action dodge, a little broken? And the answer to that is possibly. However, I will counter that with something. Again, comparing it to Rogue, one of my biggest issues that I've kind of had with Monk not getting these bonus actions for free is Monk already has a bonus action that is competing with these three actions, right? What do I mean with that? Fairly simply put, Rogue only has bonus action hide, bonus action disengage, bonus action dash. Monk has this one, has the unarmed strike, and has the flurry of blows. It has other things it can do with its bonus action, right? Now you could make the argument, yeah, okay, but Rogue can dual wield. Yes. The big difference is Rogue does not have to dual wield. Rogue can, once they get into melee, they can go into dual wielding and start dealing damage like that, and indeed use their bonus action for their second attack. However, monks don't have the opposite of that, right? Monks don't actually, well, I think they have proficiency with all simple weapons, so they have proficiency with bows, but they can't use any of their features. They can't use martial arts with it. They can't use, well, they can't use flurry of blows with it, stuff like that. They can't usually do that in the original version. So you kind of get into this thing where Rogue has a very easy time using their cunning actions, whereas Monk is already going to have to pick and choose. And if at that point, especially at second level where you have 2 key points, are you really going to waste your key point on a dodge action if you could just take an extra attack to deal more damage to your enemy? I don't think so. So I personally think this is fine. Is bonus action dodge going to be relatively broken? It's going to be good because all attacks against the monk will be a disadvantage, right? Which mitigates damage. But you also have to realize the moment an enemy forces a save, this no longer applies. Dodge only gives disadvantage on attacks. So there can still be, this can still be played around, and I feel like this is also going to open Monk up a little bit to use maybe some more obscure features that require key points. Because now you're spending a key point on dodge or on disengage or on dash, especially at second and third level, that doesn't feel good, right? So that's kind of why. Now, I've talked a long time about Mystic Action. I just kind of want people to understand. But then let's get to Key itself. Because as I said, Key has 2 features. Now, one of the things that I did like about One D&D, but I'm still not 100% sure that that was the point of the writing. I think the Step of the Wind in One D&D pretty much said that Step of the Wind, you spend a key point and you can dash and disengage, not dash or disengage. The original 5th edition does. The original 5th edition, it's either dash or disengage. I like that idea. So I took that and put that into Double Mystique. This is one of the 2 things that you can do with your key points. If you use a Mystic action, you can spend a key point to take another one. What is the point of this? If you spend a key point, you can dash and disengage, dash and dodge, or disengage and dodge. Not all of these are going to be extraordinarily useful. I think dash and disengage is probably the biggest one, right? You not only do you not take attacks of opportunity, but you also run away very fast. I think dash and dodge is sort of this idea of like, you know, I run away, but I feel like I'm still in range of something, so I'm just gonna dodge. And then dodge and disengage is like, oh, I don't want to take the attack of opportunity, but I still want the safety in case something else attacks me. Like, these are going to have niche uses with Double Mystique, I think. And I kind of like this as an idea that you can like spend a key point to do 2 things at the same time. Flurry of Blows has also slightly changed. Originally, this was you spend a key point, you can now make 2 unarmed attacks as long as you've taken the attack action. Now it is, if you've used your bonus action to make an unarmed strike, you can spend key points to make additional unarmed strike. 1 key point is 1 additional attack, and you can spend an additional number of key points. You can spend an additional key point after each attack. You can spend a number of key points each turn for this ability up to your proficiency bonus -1. So the idea here is that if you use your bonus action unarmed strike, you can choose to spend a key point to make an additional attack. You can do this after you've done the first attack, because one of the things with Flurry of Blows that I feel was slightly frustrating was you'd spend the key point to make 2 attacks and your enemy would die on your first attack. It doesn't happen a lot. I feel like it's fun. Or it's a little bit more fun. The second thing is you can now also make multiple attacks. And the reason that I added that is pretty much what ends up happening is starting at 5th level, your proficiency bonus is +3, so you can make your unarmed bonus action attack, spend a key point, make a second attack, spend a key point, make a third attack. And that's where it stops. I've also said once each turn. Baldur's Gate has proven that certain things might, in the long run, give you an additional bonus action. The idea here is you can't flurry of blows on each bonus action now, right? That might seem a little silly, but I personally prefer it that way. In case someone gets a bonus action, I don't want you spending 4 key points to like do 6 attacks and then still have your attack options. So that's that. That's level 2. I think this is like already the biggest sort of change, although level 3 is also pretty big, so yeah. But that's level 2. Level 3. Level 3 gets you Monastic Tradition and Deflect Strike. Now, Monastic Tradition I'm going to come back to once we get to the subclasses. The reason for that is I've changed the way they work a little bit. However, one thing that I will already mention about it is you might notice that the 3 traditions that I've given are Way of the Open Hand, Way of the 4 Elements, and Way of the Kensei. Why am I not putting Way of the Shadow in here? The reason is pretty simple. I personally prefer this trio. Because now Way of the Open Hand is unarmed combat, Way of the Kensei is weapon combat, and Way of the 4 Elements is elemental / magical combat. And now you get kind of 3 different types of combat in the 3 different subclass options. Shadow feels like it's this weird hybrid of like 4 elements and then like, or like magic and sort of sneaky. So to be perfectly honest, if I would do like the actual 1D&D and I would end up having like 4 subclasses for each class, Shadow would probably be the 4th subclass that I add. But for the original 3, I just feel like this is a more diverse group of subclasses personally. The rest of this, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about once we get to the subclasses because then I can explain some stuff. Deflect Strike. This originally was Deflect Missiles. You might have already guessed that. Now, this has changed a lot. So let me explain. First of all, you might notice that there's a part that's gone. Deflect Missiles used to have the effect where if you deflected the entire attack, you could spend the key points and throw the missile back. That part I have gotten rid of at this moment. The reason for that is because the rest of the feature has been relatively heavily buffed, and you're also going to notice that it has something to do with the subclasses later in the video. But pretty much the Deflect Strike has already been buffed. Now, I changed Deflect Missiles because I like Deflect Missiles. I like it as a feature. I like it a lot as a feature. But one of the things that I always found extremely weird is that a monk was capable of deflecting a bullet and catch a bullet. But if a wizard used the catapult spell and shot at a monk, they weren't able to deflect that, no matter how big or small the object was. And the reason for that was because it was a dex save. And then the 1D&D version came out, and the 1D&D version started focusing more on the damage type. Started saying, if the missile deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, then you can block it. Now, I've mentioned this during the 1D&D videos. I thought that the 1D&D version of Deflect Missiles was written by a 3-year-old. Because there are so many little holes in that ability. Like, you know, what does the 1D&D version do if someone shoots a flaming arrow at you? Like, can you block the fire damage? Can you not block the fire damage? What about the reverse damage? Can you only reverse deal the piercing damage for the arrow, or can you also deal fire damage? Like, what if it's a bludgeoning and piercing arrow? I don't know. Maybe it's a giant arrow and you want to deal bludgeoning and piercing. I don't know, right? It doesn't really make any sense. What about if someone casts Hex on you? Can you block the Hex damage? Stuff like that. So I wasn't really happy with the feature, and so I kind of looked at it like, what do I want to do with this? And then I got to the catapult part, and there's a second image that's kind of like stuck in my head where I kind of just imagine that like a level 20 monk versus a level 20 wizard. The wizard like chucks a meteor swarm at the monk, and the monk just kind of like blocks it. I don't know why. I just think that's a cool like Dragon Ball Z-esque image, and I love it, and I wanted to recreate it. So I decided to do this. Deflect missiles. Now you can use your reaction to deflect spells and weapons when you're hit by bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. When you do, you can reduce damage of these damage types by an amount equal to your martial arts die. I feel like that's more fitting than a d10, plus your dexterity modifier, plus your monk level. This is still the same. If the damage would contain, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but pretty much the idea here is you can react to any type of damage, including melee. Why is it including melee? The answer is because if I was getting to a point where I was getting into weird territory because I didn't know how to specifically talk about spells, right? Like catapult is an easy one, right? You can block catapult. But I think there's like Maximilian's Earthen Grasp is a bludgeoning damage dealing spell, but it's technically a hand that's grasping you, so it's not really a ranged attack. So I got into this weird like, am I going to have to start making specifics for this? At which point it would just become difficult. And at one point I was like, well, does it make sense for a monk who is getting attacked by a sword that they can deflect that sword? Yeah. So then why don't I just deflect everything? Is this possibly a relatively broken feature? Possibly. It might be. It legitimately might be. At which point I think I might replace like your monk level by your proficiency bonus, because you now get to like deflect so many more things. But yeah. And then if the damage type would contain multiple of these damage types, for example, someone shoots a boulder at you with an arrow in it and you'd be taking like bludgeoning and piercing damage, you can choose how much you reduce each one. This is honestly just to cover my ass in case of multiple damage types. Also realize if you take damage from a fire arrow, which deals piercing and fire, you can deflect the piercing, but you can't deflect the fire. You can kind of imagine this as like you can grab the arrow, so the arrow doesn't deal any damage, but you still burn your hands from the fire that's on the arrow. You can kind of imagine it like that. And then finally, I also wanted to be very specific. The reduction happens after saving throws. So for example, let's say that someone throws a fireball at you, you make the save, your reduction is going to happen. Well, no, fireball is not a good example. Meteor swarm, right? You make a save against meteor swarm, so you take half the bludgeoning damage. You first halve the damage and then you reduce the damage. However, it's the other way around for resistances and vulnerabilities, right? Because that's more your body being weak or strong to that, not how much you deflect it. That's really the idea there. I just feel like this fits better. It might be a little complicated, but I like it like this. So that's Deflect Strike. Is this possibly relatively broken? It might be. I personally just prefer it this way. Gotta be honest. Ability score improvement has not changed for a 12, 16, 19, as per usual. Slow fall still at 4th level. I like this feature. I figured I'd leave it. And then we get to the level that is probably going to get me killed. Level 5. There's 2 features at level 5, which are extra attack and disruptive strikes, not stunning strikes. Let's start with extra attack. I pretty much promised this during the fighter video. I have always had a problem with the fact that cantrips for spellcasters scale up to 4 times at level 5, 11, and 17. but for some weird reason, all your martial classes can't make a third and fourth attack. So I decided Monk gets to make a third attack at level 11 and a fourth at 17. I think this makes more sense. I like it a lot more, and I also think this is at least going to begin to set the scaling for Monk, kind of like, or martial classes kind of catching up to those pesky casters, so to speak. So that's the reason for this. Very simple. All right, so that's extra attack. Disruptive strikes. On the fighter video, I got a couple of comments on my stunning maneuver from someone. The name escapes me. I think it was Matt. And they talked about how they think Stunning Strike is not the greatest, or that Stunning Strike is a very dangerous feature and a very broken feature. And I, even before I made the fighter video, I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do with Stunning Strike, right? Because Wizards has been clear that they want to nerf it, right? The One D&D version only allows you to try Stunning Strike once per turn, which I already think is a good change. The problem with Stunning Strike and with stunning in general is stunning is a very good feature for the person who's doing the stunning, but a very bad feature for the person who's taking the stunning. Now, I get it. Stunning from a player to a DM isn't as bad because the DM usually has multiple creatures, but it is one of the main reasons why, like, a single creature tends to be a very difficult thing to run, right? You don't necessarily want to run like one creature, because if they get stunned, it's you know, it's over and out, right? They don't get to do anything for their next round, which, knowing that a lot of D&D combats last like 3 to 5 turns at most, that's not a lot of fun, right? If one of those, you can't do anything with that creature, and especially if they've like this big move that they want to do, which is very cinematic, but they can't do it because they're stunned, right? So stunning is not the best feature, and also I think it is the problematic feature for Monk, because honestly it is the only really good feature that Monk had. And I personally currently feel like we just need to get rid of it. I might also get rid of the stunning maneuver for fighter. I've been putting stunning on a lot of my own homebrew stuff, and I really shouldn't. So I decided, you know what, we're going to change Stunning Strike for now. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to make it a different thing. So pretty much now, Disruptive Strikes says the target must make a Constitution saving throw, or they are under the effect of the slow spell. I only wrote slow spell because I was too lazy to write out the entire spell. It's not supposed to be dispel magic before anyone asks, or counterspelled, or whatever. But the point is, for those of you who don't know what the slow spell does, I think it gives a -2 to AC. Half movement, can only take an action or a bonus action, cannot take reactions. And if you make a multi-attack, you can only do one attack. So a lot of different things. Very powerful spell. Really fun to play with. So this is always, in a way, going to have value, right? Because they can't take reactions, so mages can't use something like shield or whatever. Although, to be fair, they probably use shield on your first attack anyway. Can't counterspell. It's going to have, martial enemies are not going to be able to take attacks of opportunity. Action or bonus action for creatures, at least in standard 5th edition, isn't a big thing. Although MCDM has been pushing for people to start using more bonus actions, which I personally do really like. So it might have value there. Multi-attack becomes relatively well used at higher levels. Like a dragon makes a, 2 or 3 claw attacks and a bite attack, so they can only do one of those. -2 AC, always good. Half movements, easier to get away from, stuff like that. So it's still a pretty good feature. I also just realized that this should be until the end of your next turn. I forgot that, so it's supposed to be until the end of your next turn. So that's, I think this is pretty much the biggest in terms of changes that I have done. So I'm going to go through the rest very quickly. Evasion, 7th level, still the same. Half damage on a failed deck save, no damage on a successful one. Purity of Body, at 10th level, your mastery of Ki flowing through you makes you immune to disease and poison. Tongue of Sun and Moon, you can... I'm going to be honest, Purity of Body and Tongue of the Sun and Moon are two features that I haven't really figured out what I want to do with them yet, but I'm not necessarily very happy about it. Disease is like one of the shittiest things in 5th edition, if we're being honest. Like, either it is a huge pain to deal with, or it is easy as shit if you have like a cleric or a paladin. I think monk and paladin are immune to diseases, or you have to make like a fancy disease where that's not a thing, and then you need a special way to cure it. But then it's more of like, then I feel like it's more of a story device than a, you know, similarly to how Liam's disease worked in the mini campaign that we played. Then, you know, but then it's more of a story device, and it's not really supposed to be something that this matters to. So, gonna be honest, I think I want to change at least Purity of Body, and then Tongue of the Sun and Moon is like, I don't like it. Diamond Soul I do like. I think I'm gonna keep this as is. I actually really like Diamond Soul. Might even put this at a lower level. I'm not sure. Timeless Body. Empty Body I think is pretty decent. And then Perfect Self. This is currently ridiculously broken. You have an unlimited amount of key points. Don't play this with a Way of the Long Death Monk. You will never be able to kill that character. To be perfectly honest, wizards can also make sure that they never get killed because clone, but at least you can get rid of a wizard for a temporary amount of time, you know? Like, eh. Like, I think Perfect Self, I'm gonna have to look at Way of the Long Death at some point if I want to balance this. To be fair, it's level 20. I've talked about this during the fighter video as well. I think level 20 can be a broken feature. I really don't care. It's your capstone ability. It should be good, right? Originally, this was like, oh, whenever you roll initiative and you don't have key points, you get 4 key points. It's like, no, we're not doing that. That's shit. Okay, we're not doing that. But anyway, that is the main monk class, which leads us to the second part of this. Subclasses. Now, I told you guys that I would be talking about monastic tradition. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. You might have already noticed it only says that your tradition grants you a feature at level 3, and then from there on out, you choose 2 key features at 3, 6, 11, and 17. This might seem a little weird. Ironically enough, this is technically kind of what happened with the original 4 Elements monk, right? The original 4 Elements got to pick features at 3, 6, 11, and 17. So why am I bringing this back? As I was designing this, one of the big design ideas that I've been playing around with in my head is I want players to have 2 things. I want players to have options during the building of their character, and I want players to have options during the playing of their character, right? This is one of the reasons why Mystic Action became what it did, because it gives a player more options. It allows them to have a little bit of versatility in their turn and not be a, you know, barbarian where it's just like bonk, turns over. That's really one thing. Now, for the building parts, I haven't really talked about this, but one of the big issues with mostly barbarian and monk that I have is I feel like once you hit level 3 on those classes, the building of the character is done unless you multi-class. Right? Because once you hit level 3, You just get your subclass features at, like, in Monk's case, 6, 11, and 17, and you get your ability score improvements. And your ability score improvements are like the most interesting thing. And especially with Monk that needs to kind of focus on Dex and Wisdom, like, what else are you really going to put your ability score improvements into? Now you might be thinking, well, what about, I had a Monk and they had like 2018, like 20 in Dex and 18 at Wisdom at level 1. Yeah, I'm talking about point buy, right? Because that's the standard way of building characters, and I still haven't really found a way that I'm happy with for rolling stats. But the idea here is, Monk doesn't really have a lot of building options once you get to level 3 and beyond, right? You pick your subclass and you're done. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make little features that Monk were able to pick. For example, add 3, 6, 11, 17, similarly to how it works for Elements Monk. But then I ran into a problem, because originally what I was planning on doing was I was planning on having a subclass feature at 3, 6, 11, and 17, and then having those additional picks next to it. Like, you get to pick 2 key features at 3, and then 1 at 6, 1 at 11, 1 at 17, and every level you can switch them up. The problem that I ran into was it was very difficult for me to distinguish between which features should be standard to the subclass and which features should be pickable. And so at a certain point in time, I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to make near everything pickable, except for level 3. And I'm gonna explain why I still have one feature at level 3 in a second. It's mostly Kensei Monk's fault, actually, because now you just get to pick how your character plays. You kind of get to pick between the features. I'm not saying that my features currently are very impactful. As I said, this is a first draft, but at the same time, you already have more of a way to kind of determine how you want to play your character. Now, there's 2 things that you might be thinking, which is, 1, okay, why is that list of features not at the end? Currently, I just have like a list of features for each subclass, because I just felt like that fit better at this current point in time. There weren't really any features that I thought of that were really shared between 2 subclasses. The second thing you might be thinking of is, well, why aren't you just making one big list and you can just pick features from that? There's 2 reasons. One, at that point, we're getting very dangerously close to Pathfinder territory, and second of all, the original idea of One D&D was to make a version of Dungeons and Dragons that, although new, was still compatible with the original 2014 Player's Handbook. So you could pretty much take the subclasses that you had and put them into this. So I don't want to get rid of subclasses, at least not at this point, because I'm trying to make my own version of 1D&D to a certain extent. And so I still want to keep the subclass tradition alive. So that's really the design choice here. So basically what's going to happen now is, if you play a monk at 3rd level, you pick a subclass. You get that subclass's level 3 feature, and you get to choose 2 key features. Then if you reach level 4, if you want to, you can replace one of the key features with another one. And once you get level 6, 11, and 17, you get to pick 2 additional key features to pick. So with that in mind, let's go to the subclasses. Now, Open Hand is technically first, but I'm going to start with Kensei. Because as I said, Kensei is really the big reason why we still have a level 3 feature, right? So how does Kensei work? Simple. Kensei, starting at 3rd level, choose 2 weapons, yada yada yada, and they are your Kensei weapons, 1 melee, 1 ranged. This feature has not changed, except for any attacks with your Kensei weapons are now treated as magical for the purpose of resistances and immunities. Some of you who have paid attention might have noticed that the original base monk class no longer has magical fists, right? That's not the actual name of the feature, but your unarmed attacks are not standard or are not treated as magical anymore from a certain level. The reason for that is because that idea has been transposed into the subclasses. However, Kensei weapons are pretty important to the way that a Kensei monk works. So I couldn't get rid of this feature. This had to be a mandatory feature because the point of Kensei monk is you're fighting with weapons. So this is kind of the real big reason that every single subclass still gets a third level feature. But then from that moment on, you get to pick your subclass features. So Agile Parry, Kensei Shot, Deft Strike are all features that the original monk had. They are now just pickable, right? You can pick to have Agile Parry and Deft Strike. You can have Kensei Shot and Quick Strike. Doesn't matter. Quick Strike's a new one. Pretty much your bonus action unarmed strike that you can usually do, you can now make with a weapon instead. However, your Flurry of Blows attacks must still be unarmed strikes. Agile Parry, Kensei Shot, Deft Strike, I'm not going to explain. These are basic Kensei monk features. And then, for example, you have riposts. If an enemy within 5 feet of you misses you with an attack, use your reaction, spend a key point, make an attack with your Kensei weapon. Range Disruption I thought was a cool one. You have to be level 6 because there are level requirements on some of these. You can use Disruptive Strike on a ranged attack, for example, right? You can now slow targets from range. If you want to play more of a ranged Kensei monk, you can actually do that now. You can have the longbow. You can take, at the start, you can like take Kensei Shot and Quick Strike, which, you know, means you can now take your normal attack, or actually no, because you need your bonus action for Kensei Shot. For example, you take your bonus action Kensei Shot, and then you use Agile Parry. That also doesn't work. Anyway, I don't know how to build this yet. Gonna be honest. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Actually, you pick like riposts and Kensei Shot. So now you bonus action Kensei Shot, and then you riposte if someone hits you. Yeah, so to make an attack with your Kensei weapon, so it can be... Oh no, it can't be a ranged attack because it's within 5 feet. I don't know how to build my own subclasses. Regardless, the idea stands, right? So riposte, then range disruption is fun with like Kensei Shot because now you can make a ranged attack, disruptive shot, but also deal an additional d4 damage. Sharpen the blades as a bonus action, spend to 3 key points, and a key weapon you touch gets a bonus to attack and damage rolls equal to the amount of key points you spend. Lasts for a minute. That's a feature that was, I think, in the original Kensei monk. Your weapons start to crit on a 19, and unerring accuracy. If you miss an attack roll with a monk weapon, this should be a Kensei weapon. On your turn, you can reroll it. Very simple stuff, but as you can see, because this is a Kensei monk, all of these features are focused on Kensei weapons. That's the idea. So let's go to open hand. Now, I changed open hand pretty substantially, and the reason for that is very simple. I always found it weird that open hands 6 and 11 didn't really seem to have anything to do with unarmed strikes. I think the original 6 was like you heal half your hit points, and 11 was you now have Sanctuary up. It's not that I don't like those features, I just personally don't think they fit open hand as much. I feel like open hand should be the unarmed master who focuses mostly on just unarmed attacks, right? But yeah, so that's the idea. They get quick hands, so you can now make an additional Flurry of Blows attack, still paying the additional key points. So at level 3, usually a monk, because they have a +2 proficiency bonus, they can make their normal unarmed bonus attack and strike, and then spend 1 key point for a second attack. An open hand monk can then also spend a second key point for a third attack. Level 3, at level 5, they can in other words make 4 attacks, spending 3 key points. Very basic idea. This could technically be a feature in the list as well, but I feel like because this is an open hand monk, it fits. And in addition, because this is also something that I should mention, your unarmed attacks are now being treated as magical. This is mostly important because, as I said, magical attacks aren't a thing in the original class or in the new version of the class anymore. So I put that here. And then these three you might recognize. These are the three options that you get on Flurry of Blows if you originally took a open hand monk, right? So deck save if they fail to save, they're knocked prone. Strength save or they're pushed 10 feet away. I also added that you can spend a key point to make it 20 feet. And distracting strike, if they're hit by an unarmed attack, they can no longer use reactions. Two things that I want to mention here. These specifically you cannot use this feature at the same time as another key feature. I put this here because this is something that I'm still debating. Which features do I want to allow to interact with one another and which ones do I not want to do that? Because technically with the way this is worded right now, you couldn't use this with distracting strikes, which I don't know if I'm a fan. I think I am, but I'm not sure yet. But this is something that I'm still figuring out which features I want to not be able to work with others and which features I do. And in addition, the second thing that you should probably look at is all three of these features now just work on an unarmed attack, not only on Flurry of Blows attacks. Which is why, because originally, in the original Open Hand Monk subclass, technically you'd get all three of these at level 3. Now you can only pick 2. So I made them a little bit more powerful, and they are literally just on unarmed attacks. This might be slightly broken, not sure yet, but honestly, I like the fact that they're just on unarmed attacks. Return Fire, for those of you interested, this is the second part of Deflect Missiles. I moved it here because I feel like an open hand monk, you know, the one that fights with unarmed strikes, it makes sense that they can deflect attacks and throw them back. So if your deflect attack feature reduces the bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage to 0, you can spend a key point to target a creature within 30 feet. Make an unarmed strike against that target, dealing damage equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die plus your strength or dexterity modifier. The damage type of this attack is equal to one of the damage type that you reduce with deflect attacks. Some of you might be wondering, the One D&D version turned this to a save. I didn't really like that. I actually prefer this being an attack roll. Don't ask me why. I don't really know. I just prefer it. To me, it feels like this should be like an attack from the monk. I don't know. I like it more. But I did want to change the damage to be dependent on the monk and not on the person that shot you. Also, realize, by the way, that you can take like another, like let's say that someone deals, like has hexed you and deals necrotic damage, you can still reflect the attack as long as you've reduced the bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage to 0, just so you know. So that's how this works. Quivering Palm, requirements level 17 is literally Quivering Palm, in case people were interested. Grabbing Punch, if you hit a creature with an unarmed attack, you can grapple them as part of the attack, excuse me. Manifestation of Power, whenever you deal damage with an unarmed strike, you can deal an additional d4 points of force damage. Yes, this is based off of Baldur's Gate. What did you expect? Improved Disruption, I actually like this feature a lot. Pretty much whenever a target must make a saving throw against one of your monk features, the more you have hit them, the harder they can resist. For every time the creature is taking damage from one of your unarmed attacks, they take -1 penalty to their save. This should be for every time the creature is taking damage from one of your unarmed attacks this turn. They take a -1 penalty to their save for the rest of this turn. This is only this turn. So the idea here is pretty much like at level 6 you have 2 normal attacks. What you can technically do is you can attack, bonus action, attack. On that third attack, let's assume that you hit the first attack. You hit your third attack as well. And then you use Disruptive Strike. They now have a -2 penalty to their save because those first 2 attacks dealt damage to them. This is also why I specifically says has taken damage, because technically on your first attack, you would not get this feature. You do have to make multiple attacks. That's the idea. I'm also thinking of rewording this too. For every time the creature has taken damage from one of your previous unarmed attacks, they take a -1 penalty to their save. And again, this turn. Improved Flurry, your first Flurry of Blow strike each turn does not require the cost of a key point, and then Quiver of Palm. So that's Way of the Open Hand. I've far more focused this subclass on unarmed attacks now, because I prefer that. I think this also makes more sense. Again, I think the Sanctuary and the heal fit more with something like maybe a Mercy Monk, I think, or other types. I just don't really see it with Way of the Open Hand, at least not the way that I have them in my head. So yeah, that leaves us with one, which is 4 elements. Way of the 4 elements. Way of the 4 elements, first of all, elemental strikes. Starting at 3rd level, whenever you make an attack, you can have that attack's damage become elemental. Whenever you make an unarmed attack, your attack can now deal fire, cold, lightning, poison, or acid damage. I think in the 1D&D version, they also have a similar feature, only there you have to activate it and stuff, and it only lasts for a minute. They don't actually add poison, and I will admit I am considering getting rid of poison on this list. The reason for that being that I feel poison once again fits Mercy Monk a little more than Way of the 4 Elements, and I don't want the two of them to step on each other's toes. It's something I'm not 100% sure of, I'm gonna be honest, but the idea here is pretty much you can choose the damage type of your unarmed attacks now. Why is this a level 3 feature? Because some of these features rely on your damage type being a specific type. So for example, whenever you hit an enemy with an armed strike dealing fire damage, you can spend a key point to deal additional fire damage equal to your martial arts die, to give an example. To give another example, there's one over here, Lowered Guard. Whenever you hit a creature with an armed attack dealing acid damage, you can lower that target's AC by 1 until the start of your next turn. Right, so some of these features are based on the damage type you deal. Now I know that doesn't really matter a lot because a lot of creatures don't necessarily have that many resistances to stuff. So just pick the features that you think are best. But I also think it could be cool to just have a monk that like has different options based on the damage type, and then sometimes certain damage types just aren't as effective. Say I have to choose, do I want to use the effect or do I want to have more damage? I kind of personally think that's a cool little combination. In addition, Flaming Shot, you can turn your unarmed attacks into Flaming Blast, so you get like a ranged spell attack of 60 feet. That deals fire damage. Earth and Ground, whenever you take the dodge action, you can strengthen your defense with Earth, also increasing your AC by 2 until the start of your next turn. You know, pretty much, I imagine like Toph in Avatar, who like stamps on the ground, and the Earth kind of like overtakes part of her body, and you kind of get more defense through that, which, you know, increases your AC. Quick Strike, whenever you take the dash action, you can make a free unarmed strike during your turn. I don't know if that's clear, but the idea here is that you cannot follow this up with a Flurry of Blows. That's the idea, at least. Circuit Breaker, whenever you make an unarmed strike using lightning damage, you can spend a key point to have that target make a con save. If they fail, all attacks against the target are now made at advantage until the start of your next turn. See, this is one of those examples where I'm not sure if I want to combine this, or I want to allow people to combine this with Disruptive Strikes, although that's technically 2 key points to both get advantage and be slowed. I don't know if I want to do that. I think currently it's fine, but again, I'm still debating that part. You can give people temporary hit points. I think this one is a problem at level 20 to a certain extent, because if you have infinite key points, you can just literally give, you know, you can just keep using this feature until everybody has the max amount of temporary hit points. You know, it's a pretty good feature. Pretty much you just spend any number of key points up to your proficiency bonus. Give a target within touch range a number of temporary hit points equal to a number of rolls. I might limit this in uses, like you can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus or something. Elemental strike. Whenever you take whenever you take the dash action, you get a flying and swimming speed equal to your movement speed until the end of your turn. I don't remember where I got this from anymore. I think this is 1D&D. I already talked about this. And an environmental burst. Spend 2 key points and unleash an elemental burst of energy. Choose a point within 120 feet. All creatures within 20 feet of that target must make a dex save. On a failure, they take proficiency bonus equal proficiency bonus times 2d6 points of damage. On a success, they take half. I should also probably mention here that the elemental burst of energy has to be fire, cold, lightning, acid, or poison damage. Again, not sure on poison. Again, I might get rid of poison in that. But that's way of the 4 elements. So that's pretty much the entire current version of the class. Don't look for the document, you won't find it. I haven't published this yet. I'm still working on these documents a little bit too much. Or I'm still not sure if I'm necessarily going to spend a lot more time on these. It's kind of going to depend on whether or not people like this or not. I have an idea what I want to do for future classes, like which classes I want to tackle next. So yeah, I might continue this. I'm actually kind of having fun with like just redesigning stuff, and it's also just allowing me to have some fun designing stuff. So, you know. But yeah, that is the current version of Monk. Or of my Monk, I should say. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember, this is also for you guys to comment on, to talk about, to tell me what you think, tell me what you don't think, tell me how bad it is, how good it is, good things, bad things, whatever. There's a comment section for a reason. Please, by all means, tell me what you think. I am looking for feedback on this, I'm going to be honest. As I said, untested, untried. So yeah. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, tell me what you thought. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to end this video here. So this has been 7. Until next time.